At Drummond Golf, we understand your passion.
Nice roll.
And that's because every Drummond Golf store is owned and run by a local who loves the game as much as you do.
Yeah, it's come off the face really well.
Someone who knows where you play and what you need.
Oh yeah, looking good.
With Australia's biggest range and expert knowledge.
Great. Now let's try that putter with this grip.
So if you want to improve your game, see your local expert at Drummond Golf.
Hello and welcome to episode 135 of The Thing About Golf, Golf Australia magazine's contribution to the multitude of answers to the question, what is the thing about golf? Rod Murray's my name, but on this episode it's my colleague John Huggan who's in the interviewer's hot seat as he sits down with one of golf's most personable stars. These days, Trevor Immelman's a familiar voice in the broadcast booth, but it wasn't that long ago he was one of the game's most elegant players, authoring a career that culminated with victory at the 2008 Masters. But like every golfer who's ever pursued a professional career, the journey starts long before the first missed cut or the first cashed cheque. Immelman is engaging, thoughtful and articulate, and he has insights into the game well beyond just the narrow world of professional golf. It's an immersive discussion with lots of nuggets that'll get you thinking. And in the end, that's what this podcast is all about.
Okay, welcome to the latest edition of the Thing About Golf podcast. My guest this time around is a familiar name, face and voice these days. Also one of my favourite swings back in the day. Trevor Immelman, what was and is the thing about golf for you?
Oh, that's a brilliant question, Huggy. It's awesome to join you. There's so much to love about this game. The uniqueness, the randomness, the frustration of it, the highs and lows. It's just magnificent from top to bottom. And the beauty of it is the more you play it, I think the more you fall in love with it because you continue to learn all the time. And that's something that I've found about myself that I've realized as I've gotten older is I get a kick out of learning. I get a kick out of learning new things, finding out new things. And that's why I feel like this game has been a great match for me because you never stop learning, no matter who you are and how much you've achieved. There's always a little something out there that you can still learn. So for me, that's part of the mystique and the enjoyment of it.
Yeah. And you're speaking as someone who was basically born into golf. I mean, your father was head guy at the Sunshine Tour in South Africa back in the day. Talk to me a little bit about that. I mean, you must have been around a lot of the great players just by following your dad around, basically.
For sure. I was extremely fortunate with my upbringing. My dad being commissioner of the Sunshine Tour came after, really. I'd already been pro for a few years when he received that position. But I got a brother, older sister. My brother, Mark, is 9 years older than me. And when he got to high school, they offered golf as a sport. And him and his buddies just on a whim decided, okay, well, let's try something new. Let's get into golf. And I was 5 years old at the time and just tagged along with them to the local golf course, which is called Somerset West Country Club. And immediately I fell in love with it. And it was just an awesome time. You know, we got great weather down in Cape Town and had a wonderful junior program, lots of great amateurs and a thriving membership at the club. And it was just a cool place to be and hang out. Yeah. And so that was really my childhood. Once I fell in love with it, it was the only place I wanted to be. So I would put my clubs and my golf clothes in my mom's car in the morning. My dad would drop me off at school on his way to work. And my mom would pick me up from school at about 2 and then drive me straight to the golf course. And I'd get changed and just practice till dark. And then my dad would pick me up on his way home from work. Inevitably, I'd still be out on the course and you'd have to, this is before cell phones. So you'd have to come and find me out on the course and you'd be, he'd taken his jacket off, but he'd still have his tie and his shirt on and he'd inevitably walk the last 2 or 3 holes with me as the sun was setting. I mean, it's just like fairy tale stuff, really. I mean, you couldn't have a better way for a young kid to grow up. So I was very, very fortunate. And like you say, able to, with the lineage of amazing golfers that come from Southern Africa.
Yeah.
Having the access to be able to watch these guys compete, and some of the Americans and Europeans that would come down and play in the summer on the Sunshine Tour. I really was spoiled to be able to watch the best golfers in the world up close and personal, and then go back to my club and try and mimic everything that I saw them do. It was it was wonderful.
Yeah. Now, here's a question I ask a lot on these podcasts, because it tends to be, players that have played at your level. When did it become clear that there was some talent there?
Well, when I started, immediately, shortly after I started, I told my parents I wanted to be a professional golfer. And look, kids that age, it's fireman one week, school teacher the next, professional athlete after that. But I just stuck with it. And thankfully, they believed me and they tried to do everything in their power to facilitate that. But by the time I was 7 or 8, I was really starting to get quite good. Even though I was very little, couldn't hit the ball very far, I had a knack of being able to get the ball in the hole and make a score. And, progressed through the junior ranks and the amateur ranks. Won my club championship when I was 13 years old for the Open Seniors, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And so quite quickly I was getting pretty good and being able to travel around the world and play junior golf. And I was just, I've spent my whole life living my dream, really.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at some of the things you won. I mean, the South African Amateur, the Publinks in America, runner-up in the Amateur Championship. I'm assuming that the name Craig Watson still haunts you a little bit, does it?
Yeah, he's a fellow Scot for you.
He is, yes.
It was quite interesting at the time. I had a great run of form in South Africa playing before coming to the amateur. It was my first time playing links golf down at St. George's, which was a thrill. And managed to work my way through to the final. I was 17. Craig was 35 at the time, so he was double my age. He was a wily old veteran. And I got off to a nice start and actually had the lead. And he put enough pressure on me to where I would fold down the stretch. So that was great for him. He went on to play in the Walker Cup. I don't believe he actually turned professional, stayed amateur all along. So.
Yeah, never did. He actually captained the Walker Cup team as well.
Yeah, so impressive amateur career by him. But yeah, that one stung, let me tell you, because when you're 17 years old, it was my dream to play in the Masters as an amateur. And that was one of the 3 ways I could get there. Nowadays, there's so many more avenues, but there were few and far between back then. And when I lost, it was 3-2 or 2-1, can't remember. I was devastated. It took a long time to get over that, but looking back on it now, it was probably the best thing that could happen to me.
Yeah, you can console yourself with this is a fact. I mean, if you look at the finalists in that championship over the years, the runners-up have almost across the board done better than the guys they lost to in the final.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Why do you think that is?
I've no idea. Maybe it just drives you on. Obviously it you off to lose in the final. So, clearly, maybe that has that effect across the board. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe that is interesting. I'd never noticed that before.
Yeah. What about your? At what point did you turn pro? I mean, sounds like there was never any doubt about you doing that. What tipped you over the edge when the decision was made?
Well, first things first, I was starting to play real well and compete at the highest level in the amateur ranks. So you start thinking about it. I was in that class of Sergio, Justin Rose, Paul Casey, Adam Scott, Jeff Ogilvy, that kind of a crew. Yeah. And things were a little different back then. The internationals weren't necessarily going to university in America, and they were turning pro and cutting their teeth on their home tours and hoping to get to the European tour at that point and see if they were good enough to compete there. Yeah. And I was grappling a little bit with, should I come over here to college and go go that route. I was always fascinated with playing here in America. I had played a lot here as a junior golfer, and eventually decided that, I wasn't the best student, John. So,
right, okay.
I figured that maybe
it's always a euphemism. Yes, very good.
My kids make fun of me now because now I'm like reading and writing and studying constantly. I really do, like I said, get a kick out of learning, but I didn't quite hold the same sentiment back what I was supposed to be learning. So I decided to just go ahead and take the plunge. I'd seen how well Sergio had done. It was all around that same time. Jeff Ogilvy was already out there playing in Europe.
Yeah.
And so I turned pro in the summer of 99. So in 98, I won the Pub Links. I got into the Masters as an amateur in 99 in the springtime. And that was something that was checked off the box because it was something I always wanted to do. Got that experience of playing in my first major. And then turned pro shortly after that. And was fortunate enough to get a few starts in the European Tour and slowly but surely start to figure out what it takes to be a professional from that point on.
Did you have any doubts that you were good enough?
Yeah, for sure. I think anybody that tells you that they don't have any doubts is lying to you. I think it's extremely normal and human for people to have some sort of doubt. And so, yeah, absolutely. Especially when you start to pitch up at these tournaments and you're looking down the range and you're seeing all of these guys that you've idolized and watched your whole career. Back at that point in Europe, the Big Five was still out there playing, and Ernie Els and Goose and Bjorn and Clark and all. You run down the list of all-star Hall of Fame players that I all of a sudden was having to try and compete with in order to feed myself. That for sure casts a little bit of doubt into your mind. But it also, the beauty of that is that it's a double-edged sword because it motivates you as well. Yeah. And at that time, I wasn't quite married yet, but my wife and I, we had been dating since we were 15 in high school. So, our relationship was secure. We knew we were going to get married at some point. And there just weren't many distractions for me. She was 100% in my corner, Carmenita, and a great support system there for me. And there really wasn't anything else on my mind other than how good can I get? And the sooner, the better. So every thought, the whole process was, okay, what do I need to do to get better? Do I need to go see this coach? Do I need to practice longer? Do I need to fix my putting? What is it? And it consumed me. It consumed my whole life. And so that doubt ends up motivating you.
Did you ever get the chance to play with Seve? I asked that because Jeff Ogilvy, who you've mentioned a couple of times already, he's been on this podcast and he played the European Tour for a couple of years before he went to America and got the chance to play with Seve when he was basically done. But he still said that you would go out and he couldn't play at the level that he'd been at or anything like it. But a couple of times he would hit a shot that you would think, oh my goodness, I couldn't do that. And even at the end, Seve could still do that. And that's the reason I asked that question.
Yes. Jeff was exactly right. He's got a lot of great insight when it comes to golf. I was lucky enough to play with Seve in a tournament, in practice rounds, hanging around him at events on the European Tour. Toward the end of his career, you would find him a lot at the chipping area, just chipping around, and extremely open and giving with his time and willing to watch you hit some shots and giving you some advice on things that you could possibly try. It's one of the beauties of the European Tour back then was that family feel. I know it's cliched, everybody always mentions it, but back then we used to all spend a lot of time together because it was the way the tour worked in Europe. And so just to be able to watch him and see how he operates and the way he did things, I was lucky enough to do that. And actually, when I eventually broke through and won the Masters, the Champions dinner that I hosted was the first one that he didn't make it to because he was ill.
Right.
And he wrote a letter that he had Jose Maria stand up and read during the dinner, congratulating me and apologizing for not being able to be there, and really just his feelings around the tournament and how special that evening is and was for him. Mm-hmm. So I have that slight connection with him there as well, which is very special.
Yeah, I think Ollie is a great guy to deliver things like that. I mean, he's the most emotional player, I think, or person out there. I mean, he makes you cry at the drop of a hat, or he does me anyway, because he's just, especially at Ryder Cups and things, I mean, he's just the right guy in the right place for things like that.
I totally agree with you. He is one of the best public speakers that I've actually seen. And I kind of like to study those kinds of things, whether it be politicians or, any of that sort of thing. He has this charisma and ability to make you feel every word that he says. I actually encouraged Ollie this year at the Champions Dinner to stand up and talk, and he did. And he brought the house down as always. He's just, he's a wonderful man, great ambassador of our sport.
Yeah. On that front, I want to talk to you obviously about the Masters win. I unfortunately wasn't there, but I'm looking at some of the things you've won on the way up. On the Challenge Tour in Europe, you won in Kenya with Henrik Stenson, the runner-up. You won on the Web.com Tour with Patrick Cantley as the runner-up. And you won the Masters with Tiger as the runner-up. I mean, that's a pretty impressive list of guys that you looked in the eye and took down. Competitiveness, how you have to assume that was a big part of your skill set, if you like, back then.
Yeah, I agree with that. You're probably making me sound better than what I was there, but
well, that's my role in life, Trevor. You know that.
But absolutely, that was one of my attributes: was toughness, never quitting, maybe a little mean at times. I needed that edge to compete, and quite honestly, I think eventually that was the reason why I stopped competing so young as well, because being like that all of the time is tough. It takes a lot out of you.
Yeah.
And, eventually you could burn out if you're not careful. And I think I kind of got to that point a little bit. But absolutely, when I was sort of in my sweet spot of playing professional golf, that for sure was one of the things that I would lean on. I was a very, very hard worker. That's been the case throughout my life in anything that I've done. Once I decide I'm going to do something, like literally nothing can move me. So that was it. I would work hard, and then I would get out there and compete in a real tough way. So yeah, I enjoyed that back and forth at that time of really testing yourself and seeing, okay, how good are you in these moments when the chips are down and you're trying to win with a few holes to go.
What did you lack, if anything? I mean, you're not the biggest guy, so I'm assuming that did distance become an issue as you went on, as you got older, especially?
I would say that I was never a great driver of the ball. I was probably a little longer than average, but a little bit crooked at times. Definitely later in my career, for sure. My calling card was iron play and preciseness of iron play. I was a streaky putter, so I could get that going every now and then. But for the most part, it wasn't my calling card. It would be iron play. When I think back to my game, that was the thing I could rely on. There would be 2 or 3 times in a round where I hit an iron shot to kick in, basically, and I would make my birdies and my score that way. And I found that I was always a little bit better on tougher golf courses where, once again, you needed to have some grit and some determination to fight and hang in there and strategize your way around a little bit more rather than, nowadays with where the equipment is, that art is unfortunately leaving. our game, and hopefully we can get to a point to where we can dial the equipment back enough to where we start to see that again.
Yeah, well, you're starting to sound like me, Trevor. Be careful about that.
Well, thanks for the warning, because I don't want.
Yeah. But that description that you just gave there, it sounds a lot like the way you won the Masters.
Yeah, look, that week was a week of a lifetime. Thankfully for me, I timed it all correctly, and the stars aligned on a magnificent week. I hit the ball beautifully. I played the par fours in record fashion. I actually broke Hogan's record for scoring on the par fours. I was 10 under on the fours. Ordinarily, that's what gets the players, because you have to be so precise on approach. And the guys will make their score on the par fives because they're generally all reachable. But I hit the ball so well and had such great control into the greens that I was able to get a lot of uphill looks that I could be a bit more aggressive with. And it was pretty much flawless golf, other than the 16th hole in the final round where I pulled it into the pond and made a double bogey. Other than that, it was probably the best golf of my life.
Yeah. It must be the greatest thing to go to that dinner every year. I mean, you do a good job, you guys, of not giving away too much of what goes on, because I think probably since Sam Snead died, the level of the jokes has gone down a bit, probably. But what can you share about what goes on that evening?
Well, I was fortunate enough to meet Snead and actually have lunch with him in the Champions locker room in 1999. I played a practice round on the Tuesday with Gary Player, and he invited me up to have lunch with him after we played, and I got to meet Sam Snead. And he was exactly as you would imagine. He had the straw hat on with his green jacket, had a cocktail in his hand, and was telling stories. And it was magnificent. I was spellbound. But we've got some characters still as well. Woozy is an absolute beauty. Him and I have actually sat near each other for the last 4 or 5 years, so we're always having a good chuckle. Fuzzy Zell is always good for a story or two. So we still got the guys that are able to make the table laugh and lighten things up a little bit. But yeah, it's a magnificent evening. The thing that I always get a kick out of is, you see these legends of the game, and in many cases, guys that are getting on in age. But when they arrive in the locker room and at that dinner that night, it's like the clock just gets rolled back, and you see the child in all of them again. You see the things that they fell in love with about the game, how fortunate they feel to have won the Masters and to be able to be a part of this club. And to me, that's what I enjoy, because look, these guys have been around so much and experienced everything there is to experience. But for those 2.5 hours, it's like they're kids again. And that's a lot of fun to me. And there's such a great build-up throughout Monday and Tuesday, heading into the dinner, and you really look forward to it. And it's always just a little disappointing when it ends, because you wish it had gone on for another hour or so. But it leaves you wanting more, that's for sure. And then you start to count down the days to the next year.
Yeah. Well, the best things in life always do. That's for sure.
Good point.
I don't want to gloss over your career too much, but your record, obviously winning the Masters, is truly exceptional. But I'm looking at your majors record elsewhere, and for as good a player as you were, Trevor, I'm not that impressed, I have to say. How would you categorize your career versus par, if you like, if you had to do that? I mean, there's a lot of good things here. There's a World Cup win. There's all kinds of tournaments all over the place, and obviously the Masters sticks out. So it's far from bad. I don't mean to imply that there's anything you need to apologise for, but I'm thinking that it could have been better. Put it that way.
Yeah, I agree with you. I would say I underachieved. I would agree with you on that front. I always thought I would win the Open because I grew up in Cape Town where it's very windy, and I learned to play the game in windy conditions. And so I always had a nice ability to be able to flight the ball down and hit it through the wind. So I always thought that the Open was going to be my best shot. I never liked the US Open because back then, I might have had more luck now, but back then, old style US Open courses was like fairways narrower than 25 yards, 8-inch rough right off the fairway, greens rock hard and lightning fast. And you basically, it was just like single file plodding it along all the time. And like I said to you earlier, I was never a great driver of the ball. So you're just hacking it out of this long rough 3 yards off the fairway all day long. And I just wasn't ever able to get comfortable at the US Open. PGA, I had a little bit more luck. There's a bit more variance there with the golf courses. It's a bit more toury setup, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, look, I would agree with you. I could probably class it as underachieving. But, you know, I look back at it now and I kind of wonder if that wasn't more the preparation for what I do now. And this is actually what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting you say that, because I often wondered why you finished. I mean, there were some injuries involved in the end of your playing career, I know. But I mean, how hard was it to come to that conclusion that I'm not going to do this anymore? Because the broadcasting came later. I mean, you didn't walk straight from playing into broadcasting, I'm assuming.
No, they sort of started melding together. So, shortly after I won the Masters, I started struggling with some left wrist injuries. Had to have three surgeries in 3 different spots to fix that. And was never quite the same player, and struggled along, just really grinding it out for a long time after that. And randomly in 2017, I got a call from a guy by the name of Mark Summer, who was a producer at Golf Channel here in Orlando, when the headquarters was still here in Orlando where I live. And he flat out introduced himself and asked me, have you ever thought about doing TV? And I was like, well, no. And at that time I was still playing on the European Tour. And he said, oh, well, why don't we go and have lunch, talk about it? Did that. And then he got me in for an audition. A couple of weeks later, I tried out pre and post game show for a tournament on the PGA Tour and thoroughly enjoyed it. So for a couple of years, I was playing on the European Tour. So I would go over, do a run over there, play 4, 5, 6 weeks in a row, and then come back, do a couple of weeks of TV, go on a run again. And it was really manic for close to 3 years. And then in 2019, was finishing on the European Tour. My last tournament was the Portuguese Masters. So this is October of 2019. Mm-hmm. Nice course, wonderful hotel, weather was perfect. Just grinding away, make the cut, finish 50th. And, I was flying back home and I realized that my expenses for the week were about 4 times what I just earned by absolutely grinding on every single shot that I just played last week. And I was sort of at a crossroads of, okay, well, what are you going to do now? So I was like, okay, well, we'll put that on the back burner and just see what happens here. I'll take a little break. It's the end of 19. I was an assistant for Ernie Els at the President's Cup in Australia coming up that December. So all my focus had shifted to that. And we went down there, almost got it done, had a wonderful time. And then shortly after that, the world came to an end, it felt like, with COVID.
Yeah.
And so now really I could absolutely put it on the back burner because nobody was really rushing out to play out. I didn't have any eligibility or exemptions on the PGA Tour anymore. I guess I could have played 1 or 2 events, but I started getting offered more gigs from Golf Channel and then from CBS to call live golf. So I was like, okay, well, I'll just give this a shot and see what happens. And then really the crossroads for me came when everybody decided to restructure the majors. And remember, the Masters got moved to November.
Yeah.
And it was going to be a fall Masters. And the Open decided, oh, no, we're not going to even hold the Open. We're going to do the insurance deal. We're going to wait, push it all back. But the Masters was like, no, we're going to go in November. So one afternoon, I get a call from an executive at CBS. And he says to me, we would really love for you to work for us at the Masters. Now, I'd played in 2019. I made the cut. And that was the famous one where Tiger wins for the 5th time. It was an amazing experience. And so now I'm really presented with an interesting choice because, if you decide to really get into TV and golf on TV and you get the opportunity to call the Masters, you probably shouldn't turn that down. I mean, this is it right here. There's been very few people, quite frankly, that have had that opportunity. And to be at a hole like 15 where there's so much going on and so much excitement, and there's been so many amazing announcers over the years that have sat in that chair. I just said to my wife, look, if this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, if this is my gig from here on out, you don't turn this down. And so that was it. I went all in on it. And that was my first time in 15th Tower.
You know the feeling when your mate's golf ball flies past yours? Or when you're on the green in regulation, but he holes it from the bunker? At Drummond Golf, we get it. That's why we have our lowest price guarantee. As Australia's biggest, you can count on our massive buying power for the lowest prices in golf. But if you do happen to find a lower advertised price, we'll beat it. The Drummond Golf lowest price guarantee. Unbeatable. Conditions apply.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I think I've had this discussion with somebody fairly recently. Was the best two former player announcers in my experience, and certainly in my opinion, over the years have been Peter Allis and Johnny Miller. And both of them, the thing that they shared, they had nothing in common really as commentators, but the thing that they did share was the fact that they stopped thinking of themselves as former players and became broadcasters. And I think that's an important distinction because a lot of guys I see or listen to, and I'm making an assumption here, but a lot of guys, they don't want to leave they want to still be part of the gang, if you like, and they don't make the jump fully. They go halfway. And I think to be as good as you would want to be as a broadcaster, I think you have to do that. It's a hard thing to do, I'm sure, but I would see that as something that is almost a prerequisite.
I totally agree with you. Both of those guys that you mentioned are legends in broadcasting. Peter Allis was just amazing, absolutely amazing. The way I see it, my priority and the thing that I concern myself with the most is the viewer at home and not the player. I think that's the way you need to look at it because the viewer is the one who is investing their time and taking 3 hours out of their afternoon on the weekend when they could be playing golf or doing anything else to sit down and join you and watch the pictures and watch these great athletes play. And my priority is to make sure that they are having a good time, that they are learning something, being entertained, and really getting stuck into the golf. And at times, 4 or 5 times in those 3 hours, I want them to actually lean forward in their chair because there's something that I've said or something in the action that they're like, oh, wait, I will just hold that. I have to watch this. Just give me 4 seconds to watch this shot because he's just said this is going to happen. And now I want to see. And so those are the ways in which I think about it. I totally agree with you. You need to walk that fine line. For me, my rule of thumb is I don't say anything unless I'm willing to say it to the player's face.
Yeah.
And I believe that players understand that at the end of the day, this is entertainment for our fans at home. And, you mustn't insult the viewer's intelligence. You have to say what they're thinking. You have to say what they're thinking. Otherwise, now they're watching the golf saying, what is this fool doing? I can see this is going on. Why is he not saying this?
Yeah.
And so you have to be true to yourself and true to the viewer in that sense to be able to call the balls and strikes. And look, there's going to be times when players may get a little upset about that. But for me, as long as you're not getting personal and you're just calling the action,
Yeah.
you're going to be fine. And look, I make myself available to these guys constantly. They all have my number. I'm on the range all the time. If they got a problem with me, they're welcome to come up to me and address it and take.
Yeah, you won't be surprised to hear that I've had a few of those conversations over the years. But yeah, it's interesting what you say about the broadcasting and the education of the viewer. I mean, I've just finished watching the Olympics, as most people have. On the BBC, they have Michael Johnson, the American former 200, 400 meter gold medalist, who's fantastic. I mean, every time I watch it, I listen to him, he tells me something about the sport that he's, an expert in that I'd never thought of. And that's the ideal broadcast. And McEnroe's the same in the tennis.
Yeah.
Those are the best guys. They tell you something that you don't know, basically.
Yes. That's exactly right. I think one of the something that I'm very conscious of is trying not to say stuff that people can see for themselves. And we're fortunate that we have a sport where there's so much natural beauty with all of these great golf courses around the world and interesting things to look at that, a lot of times it's better for you to just not say anything and let the picture tell the story unless you have something else to say, like a deeper layer or something added to what the picture is. There's no point in really just throwing your voice out there and filling up the air.
Well, I've told this story before. Sorry, I've told this story before on here, I think, but my favourite ever piece of commentary was Henry Longhurst at the road hole at St Andrews, where Brian Barnes was playing, and he was just short left in 2, and he had that awkward putt over the ridge, near the bunker and, where the pin was. And Henry sets it up. He says, well, if he's not too careful, he very well may putt into the bunker. Silence. So Barnes duly putts up and back into the bunker. And there's a few more seconds of silence. And all Henry Longhurst said was, well, there we are. And it was perfect. He didn't have to say anymore.
I love it.
We all knew what he meant. So.
Exactly right. Exactly right. You've got to, our producer, Sellers Shy, who, I'm very lucky to be a part of a pretty cool team with a lot of experience sitting next to the best in Jim Nance. But our producer, Sellers Shy, who's a pretty young man for the role that he's in and a wonderful golfer. He's been a great junior golfer, amateur golfer, so he knows the game, knows what good golf is. He has a great saying that he throws at us a couple times. There's actually 2 of them. The one is pump the brakes. Pump the brakes means, guys, just everybody settle down here.
Yeah.
And then he says to us, just take a breath. Just take a breath. And, it's at that point that all of us know that, look, we all love the game and get very excited. And we've all studied hard and we have a lot of things that we think are important to say. And so oftentimes you can get carried away with that. And he's great at just setting the tone for us. You say, okay, settle down here. Let's just take a breath. Another great thing I learned from Jim Nance when I started in this role as lead analyst, just picking his brain about how he sees a broadcast, is he said he looks at it like reading a book. And each hole is like a chapter. And if there's been a lot going on that particular hole, a lot of talking, a lot of action, a lot of this, breakdowns, flyovers, blah, blah, blah. He's like, then he feels like when we go to the next hole, just take a little break. It can't be manic for 3 hours.
Yeah.
So just allow this thing to bob and weave the whole time. And so that's how he thinks of it. And oftentimes you'll find now, because I would wonder why he would take these long pauses sometimes when we got to one of his holes. And so then I asked him and he was like, well, because I felt like that there was there was so much going on that, let's just give the viewer an opportunity to collect themselves and like take a minute, and then they can start getting stuck into this next shot.
Yeah.
And I thought that was genius, really.
Yeah, I think that it's the same in writing. The best writer I know and that I've come across in my time writing about golf is Tom Callahan, who's retired now. But he used to say to me, after I'd get stuck into a subject and, I'd give somebody a good going over, say, and he would say, look, you're not wrong, but you're shouting at the top of your voice. Just speak normally. That's a good
cool.
advice as well. Yeah, it's the same advice that you got, I think.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
Anyway,
I love it.
Yeah.
So, look, at the end of the day, I'm serious with what I said probably about 5 minutes ago. I am starting to really wonder and grapple with the fact that maybe whatever my playing career was just the setup for this. And this is, and I'm not saying that because I'm arrogant or overconfident at how I'm doing in the TV. It's just because it feels right, because I enjoy it so much. And so for me, it's so authentic, the enjoyment I have in this broadcasting aspect, that's why I say that. It's so much fun. I think about it all the time. I love it. And I hope to be able to do it for a long time.
Yeah, on a much more trivial level, that I can relate to that a lot, because I played amateur golf to a reasonable level, nothing like yours, but I ended up doing what I'm doing, and it's exactly the same. I mean, I feel like I landed in exactly the right spot. I'm doing what I should be doing, if you like. So,
yeah.
Some people might disagree with that. In fact, quite a few I can think of might disagree, but still. Listen, I want to move on before we finish, Trevor, with the President's Cup, which you've had a fair bit of experience from a few different angles. I just wonder if you share my disappointment that the international team has had they've won it once since it came into being, which is not good, obviously. And they've not really got the chance to pick their best team now, because certainly the live thing has contributed to that. I mean, they've lost maybe half of what you would pick, most people would think of as their best side. I'm just wondering if you think that is the future. What is the future for the President's Cup, and talk a bit about your experiences as a player and captain and vice captain.
Okay. It's something I'm extremely passionate about. It's a tough pill to swallow when I see and we see people belittling it, calling for changes to format, stuff like that. Because even though we haven't been very good yet so far, and even though it's still fairly young in its history, this is our Ryder Cup. And international players outside of Europe have had a massive effect on the game of golf throughout history. And because of where we were born, we don't get the opportunity to play in the Ryder Cup. And so this is our opportunity. And we're thankful to the PGA Tour for coming up with this idea and allowing us to look forward to some sort of team event to be able to see if we can compete against the Americans, who over the course of history have proven to be extremely strong. The Europeans have found a way and a system to slowly but surely change that narrative, which has been one of the reasons why the Ryder Cup is so successful now. We're still in the process of doing that. We were a bit haphazard for a long period of time, but I'd say over the last 2 and now 3 cups, we really do have a system in place that will eventually lead to success. And, that's what we're focused on. Whilst I was captain, there was a giant curveball thrown at us with 6 weeks before the tournament. Our team was shaping up to be quite strong. And then all of a sudden we lost a third of our team right at the end. that caused a lot of chaos and frustration, bitterness, for sure. But we found a way to deal with that and come together and maybe even learn some new things for the future, along with absolutely learning once again from the Europeans in their performance in Italy. So we're thoroughly looking forward to having our home President's Cup here in Canada in, I guess it's just over a month's time, and seeing what we can do. You're right. There's probably 2 or 3 players that aren't eligible. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. Like, what can we do about that at this point? The President's Cup is owned and operated by the PGA Tour. The PGA Tour has had membership guidelines in place for 5 decades that everybody is adhered to. And if you don't adhere to those, there are stipulations and rules in place that need to be followed and have always been followed. And so when these players decide to go and play another tour, they're making those decisions with all of the stuff baked in. I had hours and hours of conversations with players, family members, agents, caddies, making sure that everybody was well aware of what the rules were leading up to the 22 President's Cup in Charlotte.
Yeah.
And so that's where we find ourselves. Now, this year, I think our team is shaping up very nicely. And, really, we're still going to have a young team, but very few rookies. And so we have President's Cup experience. And, slowly but surely, we've been able to have a bigger seat at the table from an international team standpoint in the decision-making process around the President's Cup. And that's one of the things that the European team has done such a brilliant job of in connection with the DP World Tour, in making the home cups feel like there's that home field advantage, just like you get at every other sport.
Yeah.
And, slowly but surely, we're starting to chip away at little things like that. I mean, these are things that weren't even thought of between 2019. And so really our team is still in its infancy. And we feel like it's an uphill battle, but we're going to get a win here at some point. And hopefully from that moment on, it'll be taken a little bit more seriously and a true rivalry will be formed, because you cannot discount the amount of talent that's going to be coming from Asia. And, we know the powerhouse of Southern Africa and Australia and New Zealand, and Canada starting to step up to the plate, and South America. And so, the pipeline of talent is going to be there. And then on top of that, just remains to be seen how the world of golf starts to come together and if any of these rules change.
Yeah, I mean, you can certainly you can make the case, I think, for on the eligibility front that it's really something that's an issue before the matches, and for people like me to moan and groan about in the run-up. But I always think that when these things start, that the golf saves everything. No matter what controversy that's been bubbling along, before the Open or the Masters, as soon as the golf starts, everybody kind of forgets about all that stuff. And that's my hope for the President's Cup. And I do hope you win it soon. I mean, I'm intrigued but as to why they haven't. I mean, you look at the teams and they don't look any better or worse, certainly not worse than a lot of the European teams that have kicked American ass in the Ryder Cup. Yeah. I mean, it's a strange thing, but I think you're right. You're probably catching up at this point.
Yeah, look, we've absolutely lacked structure. There's just no doubt about it. Yeah. And it's tough to bring together so many different cultures that are so vastly different. Yeah. You've got to have a plan. You can't just roll up. Yeah. And think that you're going to be able to get everybody going along when you've got 7 different regions represented and a half a dozen different languages being spoken in your locker room. And that's where, once again, we really finally all in on it and motivated to find the solutions and learn and do. The Europeans have provided the blueprint. You look at the decisions the Bernard Gallagher's and Tony Jacquelin's made to be able to bring these locker rooms together and eventually find a way to win on American soil at Jack's home course in 87 after coming close in 83 in West Palm Beach. Like, the blueprint is there for us. And really, it's just up to us to be able to wrestle away control of our team and start to make our own decisions and build our own identity and represent our fans the way they deserve to be represented. I keep telling people, when you take a look at the places that our team represents and you bring in the Middle East and you bring in India and places like that, it's billions of people. If we could get some of these people to start wearing a Shield T-shirt or a hat or pitching up at a tournament, saying that that's my team, I can't wait to support these guys every couple of years. Now you start to get something, and then all of a sudden these guys get a win, and now this thing takes off to the moon.
Yeah, that's the one thing that I think is obviously more difficult for the team that you just described as opposed to the Europeans. The Europeans have got one obvious thing to rally round. They're all members of the one tour, the tour that's kind of looked down upon as the inferior to the PGA Tour. So they've got that underdog mentality right off the bat, and that's the kind of thing that is a lot more difficult to conjure up, if you like, when you're talking about such a diverse group as the one. I mean, goodness knows how many countries are going to be represented in the international team, this year. So it's difficult. It'll take time, as you say.
But don't for one second think that the European team is not going to have some headaches here coming up for the next one. I very closely read through the new qualification criteria, and when some of these players need to decide if they're actually going to rejoin or take up that DP World Tour membership and have to attend to any of these fines or suspensions or whichever way you want to put it before being eligible, and then starting to have to add tournaments to get onto that list. There's some tricky times ahead for that too. Now, hopefully, the game of golf will be able to be in a different spot. Maybe some of that goes away, but
what are your hopes on that front, Trevor? What would you like to see come out the end of all this? I mean, it seems to have it's taken a long time, as we all know, and I don't know if it's stalled, but they're taking a long time to come to any sort of conclusion, longer than, and the announcement of the PGA Tour schedule for next year obviously makes it clear that there's not going to be any resolution till at least 26 at the earliest, any coming together, if you like. What's your thoughts on it, and where would you like it to end up?
I come and go on all of this all the time, John. I don't think any of the administrators, and absolutely not the players, had any understanding of how many moving parts there are when it comes to a worldwide tour in the standpoint of the DP World Tour, who just travels all over the place and has done quite honestly, a magnificent job for a very long time putting on professional golf tournaments. You talk about, the international team and the different cultures to have to deal with 1 week. I mean, putting on professional golf events all over the world with different vendors and business strategies and understanding how to do that successfully. You got to tip your cap to them and say, okay, a lot of times you guys have been unfairly looked down on, but the job that the Ken Schofields and guys like that did to be able to get this tour moving and operate successfully worldwide is remarkable. And then you look at the behemoth of the PGA Tour, massive events, 30 to 44 events, depending on what year you pick, in huge markets, and those vendors and stands and hospitality that get put up, and the amount of people that come through the gate. These are massive businesses. And so there's a lot of back and forth on all of that. There's obviously the tricky part with being human of feelings, and people on both sides feeling betrayed, people not understanding why they would need to be litigated against or sued, as a tour.
It's going to need compromise on all sides. I mean, but I always go back to anything's possible. I always go back to, I don't want to trivialize this, but the Northern Ireland peace agreement that came at the end of the troubles over there, where there was any number of people had lost their lives on both sides of the argument, and they managed to come together and find a way out of it. So if that's possible, this surely has to be possible too.
Yeah, you would think so, but it's going to need a desire from both sides. The PGA Tour and the DP World Tour have proven that they are sustainable, and it's a model that works, and it's a model that can make money. In particular, now that the PGA Tour has got a for-profit arm that people are able to invest into. Anyone who's wanting to invest is, really the prerequisite is that you're going to invest because you anticipate to make more money.
Yes.
And so the PGA Tour has proven that it is an entity that can make money.
Yeah.
And so, you've got to figure out the balance between that.
I think the Asian Tour's something that needs to be looked at as well. I was at an international series event recently to do a story, and that's a sleeping giant in many ways. That Asian Tour has been for a long time, and they're starting to make progress. They've got the Saudi money, whether that's good or bad, and some people approve and some people don't. They've got that behind them, and 10 years from now, they're going to be bigger and better than they are now. That's for sure.
I agree with you. Look, I would say probably most importantly, is it going slower than everybody wants? Yes. Is there more at play than probably anybody realizes? For sure. I know that for a fact. So it is going to take some time. But I do think we're finally at a point to where the decision makers and the leaders that are shepherding the professional game through this are starting to get on the same page.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be a very interesting next few months to see how this all shakes out.
Yeah. I mean, my hope is that, I can say these things a lot more than most because I'm a journalist. I'd like to see some kind of global circuit evolve out of this and not just be, it'd be mostly in America, but not always in America. And I think that's the way to get everybody on board here. You get the Australian Open could be resurrected. It's in a terrible state compared with what it used to be. South African Open would be another. I bang on about this a little bit, but I always think that the top 10 players in the world should get together at the start of every year and say, right, we're all going to go somewhere. We're going to go 10 different places for nothing. We're just going to go because it's the right thing to do. And I always use the South African Open that Rory went to a few years ago as a favour to Ernie. And the place was moving with kids because
it was awesome.
There. And if they all did that once a year, it's not a lot to ask. I think the world would be a better place. Put it that way.
It was awesome. Look, there's a few agents that are not going to want to hear your sentiment of going somewhere to free. But
they're often the biggest problem, to be honest.
So, I totally agree with you, though. And I remember that South African Open. And Rory ended up coming close to winning. He finished second.
That's right.
And it made it even more exciting because he was coming down the stretch. And obviously, when he realizes he's got a chance, he kicks it into another gear. And people in South Africa really got a feel for this top-class athlete at full stride. And so that was a lot of fun, and it created a lot of buzz. I agree with you. I think there are a number of tournaments that could be resurrected and put back to their rightful place in the upper echelon of the game. But once again, it just all comes down to money, unfortunately, and understanding the dynamics of these different economies and the fact that, the majority of the money comes from TV in America. And if you're going to go to these places, how do you put it on TV in America in a window of time to where the fans are still interested?
Yeah.
And, even when we think of the Scottish Open down the road from you, which the company I work for, CBS, it's one of our favorites of the year. We love it. We love coming over and we're coming over for 4 or 5 days, but we love being a part of that tournament and getting to feel like you're a part of where golf started. You're back in like the homeland, so to speak.
Yeah.
And, but you think about our TV window for the Scottish Open. Those players have to play so late just so that it can be put on at a decent time here in America.
Never mind the players, Trevor. What about the poor journalists who have to slog away till 10 o'clock at night and then drive home? Come on. It's all about us.
We're eating into your deadline, but thankfully the sun stays up till about 10:30 that time.
Oh, at least, yeah.
But, that's just a little example, John, of how powerful a player TV in America is, because they give so much money to the PGA Tour in these TV rights to where, in a lot of cases, the decision comes down to them because they're the ones that have to sell this product. So when you start to think about an Australian Open or a South African Open, some of these people that are far smarter than me start to go, well, whoa, how are we going to make this work for the majority of our audience? And that's where it starts to get a little tricky. But saying that, the romantic in me totally agrees with you and believes in the same things of, how do we every now and then take this somewhere to where it well and truly can make a difference in that community and in that country.
Listen, Trevor, I'm conscious that I've kept you talking here a long time, and I'm happy that we've done this by Zoom, and I can see that it is you talking to me for sure, because if it was just the voice, it could be your brother. I mean, does anybody sound more like each other than you two? My goodness, I can't tell the difference, sadly.
You can tell us apart because he uses much longer words than what I do.
Yeah.
That's how you know the difference.
Yeah. Anyway, as I say, thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to the next time we bump into each other, maybe on the range at the Scottish Open.
Hope so. Great to catch up with you, John. Have a good one.
Okay, thanks, Trevor.
Well, anybody who remembers that 2008 Masters will remember just how dashing Immelman looked at the green jacket ceremony. But I think that interview proves he's much more than just a pretty golf swing. Big thanks to Trevor and to Huggy for bringing us that engaging chat. Well, that's it for episode 135, but make sure to come back for episode 136 here on The Thing About Golf.